Hazard assessment. It is a policy of Versys that all work activities are assessed to identify existing and potential risks to the health and safety of our employees, contractors, visitors, and/or the public. Management, supervisors, and workers must all work together and take part in the training in hazard identification and risk assessment. All employees, subcontractors, and visitors are responsible to notify site supervision or the site contact of any observed hazards while on site. Management roles and responsibilities. Overall operation of the hazard assessment program. Ensure that program is reviewed every 2 years. Ensure that resources are provided in order to control hazards effectively. Ensure employees receive training in the hazard identification and risk assessment process. Supervisor roles and responsibilities. Take part in hazard assessments on each identified task group for each job performed under their supervision. Take part in developing controls in place for identified hazards. Review reported hazards, near misses, incidents, and first aids to identify potential hazards and follow through on action items to reduce reoccurrence. Take part in developing safe work procedures for hazards that cannot be controlled through engineering controls. Communicate identified hazards to workers. Provide PPE to protect against hazards that cannot be controlled otherwise. Hazard assessment team worker responsibilities. Ensure hazard assessments are completed before work begins. Determine positions, processes, and areas to be analyzed. Break each analysis down into a sequence of basic steps and tasks. Identify all existing and potential hazards of each step. Evaluate the control methods for the identified hazards. Prioritize the identified processes or areas according to risk. Take part in training provided to educate on hazard assessment. Must participate in the hazard identification and assessment program. Affected workers must review and sign off on completed hazard assessments. Report identified hazards or near misses to a supervisor or as soon as possible. Follow administrative controls put in place to control against identified hazards. Attend training and use personal protective equipment when required to control against identified hazards. Hazard assessments are performed to analyze the hazards of the worksite and activities and apply necessary controls to protect workers from harm. Affected workers must participate in the completion of hazard assessments. Versys uses 2 types of hazard assessments: formal hazard assessments. Job safety analysis is completed on all jobs and tasks for positions within our company. A JSA may also be performed prior to specific projects. Field level hazard assessments must be conducted when a new activity is introduced at the worksite or whenever work is conducted at a temporary mobile worksite before work begins on the day of the job, and repeated if changes are introduced. Hazard definition. Any condition or circumstances that has the potential to cause injury, illness, disease, or damage to property or equipment. The effect of a hazard can be acute, which is immediate, or chronic, which is long-term. Hazard categories. Physical hazards. They can include, but are not limited to, slipping and tripping on wet floors, cords, and pipes laying on the floor, moving parts from belts, flywheels, working at heights, roofs, platforms, pressurized systems such as boilers or vessels, vehicles, traveling or working around, fire, structure or wilderness, electricity, wiring, over and under utilities, ergonomic, excessive noise from hand tools or compressors, inadequate lighting, work areas, vaults, extreme temperatures from heat or cold, vibration from jackhammers or equipment, and workplace violence. Chemical hazards include but are not limited to gases such as acetylene or chlorine, vapors from paint, gas, varsol, mist from pesticides, herbicides, or machine fluids, fumes, welding, exhaust, soldering, dust, silica, asbestos, or wood dust. Biological hazards include but are not limited to viruses and bacteria in the blood, bodily fluids from humans and animals, molds or fungi, wildlife or domestic animals. Psychological hazards include but are not limited to harassment, bullying, stress, or fatigue. Hazards are identified on our hazard assessment documentation and then evaluated for risk. Components of risk. Probability. How likely is an incident to occur on the hazard presented and the frequency of the task? Severity. How severe could an accident be? What are the negative impacts or harm that may be caused? Values for these components are multiplied together to give risk rating, identifying the hazard as low, moderate, or high risk. Hierarchy of controls. Elimination, substitution, engineering, exposure controls, warning, administration, and PPE. Elimination removes the hazards. Substitution replaces hazards. Engineering isolates the hazards. Warnings promote awareness. Administration manages behaviors, and PPEs is wear protection. Hazard control. Hazard controls must be put in place for identified hazards. When considering hazard controls, the hierarchy of controls should be applied. Hazard reporting. All hazards must be reported to a supervisor so that they can be effectively controlled. Controlling hazards will provide all employees with a safer and healthier workplace and prevent accidents and incidents from occurring.